Hello everyone, my name is Steven. Today we're going to look at the last question on Yang Math League round 87. So the question is, compute the sum from n equal to 1 to infinity, and the term we're adding up is 1 over n cubed times n plus 1 cubed. So this question is a very standard telescoping question, and let's see what we can do with the term that we're adding up. First, notice that it is equal to 1 over n cubed times n plus 1 cubed is equal to 1 over n cubed times, 1 over n times n plus 1 cubed. And the things in the bracket, we can write it as 1 over n minus 1 over n plus 1. And this cubed. And now we can expand this, and we can easily expand this into n cubed minus 3 over n squared times n plus 1, and then plus 3 over n times n plus 1 squared minus 1 over n cubed, n plus 1 cubed. So now we can group like terms together. So this is equal to 1 over n cubed minus 1 over n plus 1 cubed. And then the second term, so the middle two terms, we can write it as plus 3 over n times n plus 1 multiplied by 1 over n plus 1 minus 1 over n. And if we continue to simplify it further, we'll have continue to simplify the second term, that is. So this is equal to 3 times 1 over n minus n plus 1. And this is plus 1 minus 1 over n. So this is, in fact, this is equal to, so 3 times 1 over negative 1 over n squared minus 1 over n plus 1 squared. And then we'll plus 2 times n times n plus 1, 2 over n times n plus 1. And this will just simplify into, so 6 over n times n plus 1 minus 3 over n squared plus 3 over n plus 1 squared. And this is its bracket. Okay, and the first term is just equal to 6 over n minus 6 over n plus 1. And then the second term is just 3 over n squared plus 3 over n plus 1 squared. Okay, so after all this calculation, we can find that, so 1 over n cubed times n plus 1 cubed is equal to 1 over n cubed minus 1 over n plus 1 cubed plus 6 over n minus 6 over n plus 1, and then we'll minus 3 over n squared plus 3 over n plus 1 squared. Okay, so now we can take the sum from 1 to infinity, and so that will be just from n is equal to 1 to infinity, so 1 over n cubed minus 1 over n plus 1 cubed plus 6 over n minus 6 over n plus 1, and we'll minus 3 over n squared plus 3 over n plus 1 squared. Okay, so this is equal to the sum of n is equal to 1 to infinity, 1 over n cubed minus, plus 6 over n minus the sum from 1 to infinity 1 over n plus 1 cubed minus 6 over n plus 1. And lastly, we'll minus sum from n is equal to 1 to infinity 3 over n squared plus 3 over n plus 1 squared. Okay, so now for the second term that we're subtracting, this can be easily simplified into, so n is equal to 2 to infinity, and sum we're taking together is just 1 over n cubed minus 6 over n. And we can just drop the first term down here and equal to 1 to infinity 1 over n squared n cubed plus 6 over n. And because as n approaches infinity, the terms we're adding up is equal to 0. So the first two terms will just be, so first we need to write the last term down here. N is equal to 1 from 1 to infinity 3 over n squared plus 3 over n plus 1 squared. So from here, the first two series will just simplify into 1 over 1 plus 6 over 1. And then we'll evaluate the last series. So this is just n is equal to 1 to infinity 3 over n squared plus 3 over n plus 1 squared. Okay, and this is just equal to 7. And now we look at the second term. It is well known that the sum from n equal to 1 to infinity 1 over n squared is equal to pi squared over 6. And we will use this famous result. So right off the bat, we can realize that this part is, so the first part of the sum we're adding is in the form 1 over n squared, except we're multiplying by 3. So for the second term that we're adding up, we're just missing the first term, because the series starts from 1 over 1 plus 1 over 4 plus 1 over 9. But the second term we're adding up starts with 1 over 4. And we can just add 3 and then subtract 3 in the end. So this is equal to 7 minus, so the sum from n equal to 1 to infinity 3 over n squared minus sum from n equal to 1 infinity 3 over n plus 1 squared. And so this is equal to 7 minus, we'll use the result here. So this is 3 times pi squared over 6 minus here, because we're shifting the index, we'll get n equal to 2 to infinity 3 over n plus just n squared. And this is 7 minus pi squared over 2 minus the pi squared over 6. So 3 times pi squared over 6 minus 1. And after we evaluate this, we'll find that this is equal to 10 minus pi squared. And therefore, the answer to this problem is 10 minus pi squared. And we're done. This question tests you on telescoping sums, and once you find a formula on how we can telescope it, we'll actually also need the famous result that the sum of 1 over n squared from 1 to infinite is equal to pi squared over 6. I hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure to subscribe my channel.